Crossover Thursday for Monday Night Football. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants here, breaking down the Monday Night Football matchup. Get it all here on the Crossover Thursday episode of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Chris Carter, host of Locked On Steelers, here with Patricia Traina, of the host of Locked On Giants, here breaking down Steelers-Giants Monday Night Football primetime matchup and all the things that come with it. As always, Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. That's at Prize Picks today. Patricia, it's been a minute since we've done a show together. It's nice to see your face, and I think it's kind of funny. Both of our teams that we cover have been dealing with legitimate who's going to play quarterback questions, but it seems like both are solidified going into this week. The Steelers with Russell Wilson, the Giants with Daniel Jones. But I think it's a little different because the Steelers got two quarterbacks that they're still trying to decide that just got here this year. But Daniel Jones has been the guy here. Can you talk to us about the state of Daniel Jones in 2024, where Brian Daboll is with this offense, and what they're trying to do with Daniel Jones at this stage of his career?
Well, I mean, the state of Daniel Jones, if I'm being totally honest with you, inconsistent, maddening inconsistent. You know, there are weeks where he plays decent enough. There was a little stretch there earlier in the season where you say, okay, maybe he's trending in the right direction. Maybe Malik Nabers made the difference. Maybe a better offensive line has made a difference. And then he goes right back to playing like, you know, he has no clue with the, you know, the double pumps, the misreads, overthrowing guys. You know, I did a radio spot earlier today in which they asked me about Daniel Jones. And I said, the number one thing that drives me crazy with Daniel Jones is, when was the last time you saw him consistently hit receivers in strides? You know, the Giants talk about they want to be a big play offense. Well, to be a big play offense, you got to be able to get the yak, right? Well, how are you going to get the yak if you have your receiver have to stop to catch the ball, which gives the defender time to come up, make the play, and limit the yak? It's just not going to happen, Chris. It just won't. So that's one of the things I see as being frustrating for the Giants. And look, Brian Daboll trying to give Daniel Jones every opportunity to go out there, be successful. The line's been a little bit better now. It wasn't that great last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. No Andrew Thomas, first week without Andrew Thomas, but that was just part of the problem. So, you know, Daniel Jones, bottom line, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass at MetLife Stadium since last year. Right? I think I saw a stat, longest streak that a quarterback has gone without throwing a touchdown pass at his home stadium. Fortunately for the Giants this week, they go on the road. They've been sort of a road warrior type of team. So we'll see if we get a better version of Daniel Jones. But the bottom line is he's been too inconsistent. And it's to the point now where Giant fans have had enough of him, where the media has said that, you know, they've got to move on. And I, for one, believe that they need to go on and just end this whole experiment, because we just can't keep going on like this.
Your backup is Drew Lock, a guy who, you know, people have thought, you know, could get a chance to be a guy in the future. Is there any chance in this game that, like, if things go poorly for Daniel Jones, that Daboll will put Drew Lock in? Or is Daniel Jones still the solidified guy? Like, it would take like an ultimately abysmal all-time performance to get to that point.
Well, they put Drew Lock in last week, actually, against the Eagles with about 11 minutes left. And Daboll's explanation was, we were trying to get some juice going, trying to get a spark. Now, how many teams do you know will bench their starting quarterback in favor of their backup to get a spark? It doesn't happen very often. So that told you everything kind of you needed to know about where things are headed with Daniel Jones and as far as Brian Daboll is concerned. So to answer your question, I think if the game becomes a blowout again, you might see it, because remember, Daniel Jones does have that injury clause in his contract where if he can't pass a physical by next spring, the Giants get on the hook for $23 million in guaranteed salary.
Whoa.
And against a very, very good Steelers defense, if that game becomes out of hand, you pull Daniel Jones, you don't risk him getting hurt.
That certainly sounds like something. And with Andrew Thomas on injured reserve and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, facing you in Acrisure Stadium, that's something that you have to be aware of. But to your point, I think quarterback question. It's funny, Steelers fans are saying, well, wait a second, what about the situation? We just switched quarterbacks. Yeah. The Steelers have their switch, but I think there's a little bit of a different tone right now. Not that Russell Wilson should be declared, the redeemed quarterback or comeback player of the year yet or anything, but he had a solid, first week of action, 2 touchdown passes, a touchdown run on a QB sneak. The Steelers scoring 37 points at home against the Jets, which was the number 7 scoring defense last week. And I think people saw, hey, this is why the Steelers are giving him a shot after Justin Fields had 10 touchdowns in 6 games with only 1 interception. People were really impressed by that. But Steelers and Mike Tomlin, saying, hey, we're going to give Russell a shot. And as I said, partly because he's getting the ball downfield. And to me, I think that could be the difference in this game, Patricia. When I look at how Daniel Jones has moved the ball through the air for the most part this year, he has only completed through all the games that he's played 5 passes beyond 20 yards downfield. For perspective, Russell Wilson in 1 start last week completed 2 out of 3, and was able to get chunk plays out of it. And it's something the Steelers, I think, want to do in this game. How much of Daniel Jones's game does depend on those short and intermediate routes? And like you were saying, if he's not leading guys and having to stop, like what is Brian Daboll trying to do to unlock maybe a bigger play factor that kind of takes the pressure off of Daniel Jones to have to be that guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's the short to intermediate game, but the problem is the book is out on Daniel Jones. You have defenders coming in, sitting on those short to intermediate routes, and the yak just isn't there. It just isn't. And, the other thing that's really frustrating about this is you get guys that get open. In the past, you can make the excuse, the Giants receivers don't get open. They're getting open on film. But Daniel Jones has always been a one-read quarterback. You very rarely see him go to his second or third read. And that's because either his clock in his head is screwed up, or he feels that he has to push or get a ball into a window where he doesn't really have any business throwing into. I mean, it could be any number of things with him, but the idea has been to get those short to intermediate range passes completed and let the receivers pick up the yak. But again, if you're not hitting them in stride, then what's the point?
I think that's something that the Steelers, that's a reason why they switched to Russell Wilson, whereas Justin Fields would make good plays, especially with his legs, and he would occasionally, have a good read at the right time. In my studying of him, like you were saying about Daniel Jones, the Steelers had open receivers. And I think that's one thing, too, that we'll get into when we talk about these receivers. Both teams have one specific receiver that everyone wants to talk about. And then behind them, it's, a little bit murkier. I do think Darius Slayton's a better number 2 than what the Steelers have right now at wide receiver wise. But the fact that the Giants are having these open guys, Daniel Jones isn't seeing them, that's something that I was saying about Justin Fields, and Justin Fields not making as many mistakes as Daniel Jones and turning the ball over, but still an issue that Russell Wilson, at least for one game, was able to improve upon, hitting guys like Darnell Washington, hitting guys like Pat Fryermuth with Calvin Austin in space to let them kind of make natural plays within the schemes of the offense. I think that could be a big turning point in this game, is if Russell Wilson shows that last week wasn't a fluke and that he can do that consistently for the Steelers, that could help them. And if the Steelers can keep Daniel Jones from finding any rhythm there, that might allow the Steelers to control their pace, the pace that they want to play on defense, and really slant the game in their favor there. What can Daniel Jones, or what in your mind, you study film, we talk football, ball, what can Daniel Jones do that within his skill set that you think that can offset maybe the struggles that you've seen from him?
Basically run. That seems to be the strength of his game.
Yeah.
And, it's a double-edged sword. Like I mentioned, he's got that injury guarantee. And unfortunately, when Daniel Jones runs, he runs like a running back. He doesn't run like a quarterback. And by that, I mean, I don't think the guy knows how to slide. And if he does, there's some of the ugliest slides I've ever seen. Eli Manning used to be a lousy slider, and then I think he worked with a baseball coach to learn how to slide. Daniel Jones, for whatever the reason, believes he has to lead with his head, lead with his shoulder, push forward, try to get that extra yard. And you just sit there and you say, oh my goodness, don't do that, because you're afraid that somebody's going to come in and whack him in the wrong spot, get him on the shoulder, worse yet, get him in the head. But look, his legs are a valuable asset. They're probably, one of the strongest parts of his game. So, the Giants, they try to integrate some design runs for him. Not as many, I think, as they did last year, not last year, the year before. But that is a part of his game, and it is a way to help, maybe back up some or keep the defenses honest, because now they've got to account for the possibility of him taking off on an RPO.
I hear that. I think that's a big talking point for sure, because Daniel Jones and Mike Tomlin talked about that. That's a threat the Steelers have to consider. Alex Highsmith talked about in the Steelers locker room on Wednesday. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the front that's going to have to deal with that for the Steelers in containing Daniel Jones's run game, as well as the Giants defensive front, because a defense I do think has some underrated aspects to it. We'll talk about that next here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Patricia Traina, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics have a pre-alcohol probiotic drink that is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Trust me, I've had quite a few of those. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct that's in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Well, pre-alcohol it produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to take Z-Biotics before your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. I first gave pre-alcohol a try before I had some birthday fun with my friends recently, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt just fine after a lot of festivities. So here's how you use Z-Biotics to your benefits. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol before your first drink of the night. Step 2, still drink responsibly. You can't go too crazy. Pace yourself and hydrate. But step 3, wake up and you can enjoy your next day refreshed as if you don't even remember drinking. It's that easy. So go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use lockedonnfl at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use the code lockedonnfl at checkout to get 15% off. That's Z-Biotics. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. Patricia, I'd say both these teams have some household names on their defensive fronts that everyone likes to talk about a little bit here. You look at the Steelers, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, defensive player of the year from a few years ago. In there, Cam Hayward, a Walter Payton man of the year. But on the flip side, Dexter Lawrence is a bad man. Brian Burns is a bad man. They know how to get after the quarterback. They know how to make plays as well. And when I look at the Giants right now, they have the number 12 scoring defense, the number 12 defense in total yards. And in passing defense, they've given up the 6th fewest passing yards. They haven't created a lot of interceptions this year, but they have made plays this year. What is it about this defense? Is it the pass rush? Also, shout out to Jason Pinnock, covered him in college at the University of Pittsburgh. He was a heck of a player in college too. But what is it about this Giants defense that you think can be a difference maker in this game Monday night?
Well, I think you got to start with Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with him from the time that he was with Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And of course, he had the reputation as not really being a heavy blitzer, certainly not like how Wink Martindale was. Shane Bowen, though, has mixed it up. There have been times when he's gone, you could say, outside his comfort level with blitzing. For example, the game against Cleveland, when he brought the kitchen sink against Deshaun Watson at the time. Then against quarterbacks who are a little bit more mobile, you dial it back. But I think the real key for that Giants defense starts up front with Sexy Dexy, leading the NFL. Yeah, that's his nickname.
I didn't know that was a nickname.
It is.
Lawrence's nickname is
Sexy Dexy. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue.
He's leading the NFL in sacks. He's got 9. Now, keep in mind, folks, he is not an edge rusher.
He's an interior
nose tackle, an interior defensive lineman who, by the way, has faced double teams on over 68% of his pass rushing snaps. That per NFL Next Gen Stats. And he has beaten them. And I think the next nearest defender, I want to say maybe has four sacks, I think it's 4 sacks. Maybe it might be 5. But the next nearest defenders in the sack race, all edge rushers. So Sexy Dexy, he is having an MVP type of year. I don't know if he'll necessarily get it because the Giants aren't doing very well. But look, you got to put him in the conversation. And with Aaron Donald having retired, Sexy Dexy's going for that throne, baby. He is going for that throne to be the best defensive lineman in the NFL. And so far, making a strong case. So you start there. You mentioned Brian Burns. Brian Burns, what a trooper.
Yeah.
The dude is playing with a groin injury, a very painful groin injury. They call him Spider-Man, by the way. Not as sexy as the name Sexy Dexy, but his nickname is Spider-Man.
That's going to make me laugh the rest of the show. I'm so sorry.
So you got Spider-Man and Sexy Dexy. So Spider-Man, Burns, he's been playing with a very painful groin injury since week 3, I believe it was. And after the game on Sunday, I happened to walk out of the locker room and he was, I was kind of walking with him. Poor guy was limping. And I said, Spider-Man, I said, what's going on, man? I said, are you okay? And he's like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. You know how players are. But I'm telling you, Chris, he walked like an old man. And I was very, very concerned with, is he going to be okay? Now, unfortunately, they've got an extra day. But, this guy, he was in pain. He was in some serious, serious pain. And, the key thing with him is that explosiveness that he has.
Yeah.
And especially, with Kayvon Thibodeau on IR right now.
Right.
So, they need him. He's been a key to that pass rush. He might not have, the glamorous numbers, but he has opened things up for other people to make plays. And, I think that's where you start with. You start with that defense up front, which, by the way, has taken off some of the onus from that defensive secondary, which I know was a big concern of mine, given the youth and inexperience back there.
No, listen, the defensive front is definitely respected. And Dexter Lawrence, you're right, it's a problem. And I think that could be a matchup problem for the Steelers if they're not careful, because the Steelers, they're dealing with plenty of injuries themselves. Zach Frazier, the starting center, is out for this game. That they're putting in Ryan McCollum, who started and did decently last week, but he didn't go up against Dexter Lawrence. That's going to require some attention. Also, the guy that was supposed to be starting to his right, James Daniels, is out for the season. They have rookie Mason McCormick starting at right guard. He's started, I think, 4 games so far, and he's played well. But again, it's going to test how well when they have to go up against them. I think Isaac Seumalo is going to have to help quite a bit against Dexter Lawrence up the middle. And look, I have a ton of respect for Brian Burns back to his days with the Panthers. That guy is a heck of an athlete. He's in his prime at 26 years old. He is going to be a problem. If he's on the field, I don't care. If he's on the field, he's good enough to be a threat. The Steelers have to know where he is, whether he's on Broderick Jones's side or Dan Moore's side, neither of which have been too great this year. Dan Moore has actually been improving at left tackle, while the Steelers are also missing Troy Faltano, their first-round pick, who they were hoping would be contributing more to the Steelers' offensive line right now. But that's a big factor the Steelers have to consider. On the flip side, the Giants also dealing with injuries. Andrew Thomas, one of the better offensive tackles in the league, on injured reserve, and that's not a great timing for that. With the Steelers getting Alex Highsmith back last week, he was pressuring Aaron Rodgers a lot last Sunday night when he played the Jets. I have a feeling that they're coming after Daniel Jones with the same sort of pressure. And the Steelers, historically, with this group of guys, they've gotten very used to mobile quarterbacks because they play twice a year every year, or, well, when he's healthy, Lamar Jackson, and they've been pretty good at containing him. So if I'm the Steelers, I'm looking at that matchup there, and something that you and I talked about off camera was the potential of switching around offensive tackles in this situation. Jermaine Deluminor, he plays right tackle where TJ Watt would line up all the time, but trying to switch him over to left might be the move. But Alex Highsmith, also a problem there. Patricia, how do you anticipate the Giants using their offensive linemen? Do they rotate guys around, or they try to stick with what they kind of got right now?
No, they're going to stick with what they have. First of all, they're not going to move Jermaine Illuminor. You want him going up against TJ Watt. I mean, because if you move him to the left side, then you've got to plug in Evan Neal, the 7th overall draft pick of his class. Evan Neal missed a lot of time, all of the spring, most of summer, while he was rehabbing from an ankle injury, and he had a setback from that ankle injury that he had surgery for. So he is still behind as far as getting up to speed on the technique that new offensive line coach Carmen Brasillo was trying to teach. So right now, Evan Neal is not an option. So what the Giants did last week, they put third-year man Joshua Zudu in at left tackle. He played left tackle for them last year when Thomas went down with the hamstring. The difference being is he hadn't practiced there all all of last spring, last summer, and they put him in there for that, and it was a disaster. Well, this year he practiced at left tackle the spring, the summer, but you know what? The young man works hard, and I think he's just the sweetest kid, one of the sweetest kids on the face of the planet, but he's not a left tackle. He's a guard, if anything. And he struggled last week against the Eagles, gave up 2 sacks right away, a bunch of pressures. I think he had something like 5 pressures total, which was not the highest on the Giants offensive line, believe it or not. That honor went to center John Michael Schmitz. But I think if you're the Giants, you probably want to make sure you give him some help on that side, especially on obvious passing downs, because if you don't, you just running the risk of, the Steelers crashing in on that side and dropping Daniel Jones. And like I said, that injury guarantee is staring you right in the face. So if you're the Giants, you want to make sure that Daniel Jones is able to walk out of that game on his own accord.
And on the flip side, the Steelers with Russell Wilson is not immobile. He gets to move around, but he's not Justin Fields either. And I think the Steelers recognize that. And one thing we saw with the Jets, the guy that's right behind Dexter Lawrence in the chase is Will McDonald, who they faced last week. And Russell Wilson, made it so he only got sacked one time in that game. But this is a game where, we saw last week when he faced pressure, instead of trying to do the old Russell Wilson way of running around, spinning, trying to do crazy things, he either gets the ball out quick to a target or he throws the ball away in smart ways. And I think that's what the Steelers are going to try to do in this situation. So I think a big tell of this game is going to be which of those defensive duos up front can be more of a problem to force the quarterbacks, and how do those quarterbacks respond? Can TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, also got to throw in Alex Highsmith because he's also been really good. They're more of a trio up front. Can they make Daniel Jones more uncomfortable and make him make more mistakes than Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and the Giants defensive front? And if they can get Russell Wilson to maybe get into some bad habits, that could be a factor that helps the Giants and kind of offsets what could be an experience advantage for the Steelers with a guy like Russell Wilson, who's been in the league for quite some time, and Daniel Jones, who's still trying to keep his foothold as a starter in the league right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I mean, it all starts in the pit, Chris. I mean, we know that. We've been watching football forever. It starts up front. Whoever wins the battle of the trenches, that's usually who's going to come out on top. So I'm curious to see how these matchups play out. I'm curious to see who can pressure the opposing quarterback the most and, get them off their marks. And we'll see. The Giants 1-15 with Daniel Jones as a starter in primetime games. So I would say, even though the Giants have had a pretty good record on the road, the odds don't favor him based on the history, but that's why you line up and you play the game.
I want to talk about 2 players in particular on both sides here, because both teams, I think, have a receiver that is talked about a lot nationally. We'll talk about Malik Nabers and George Pickens in a minute here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Stick with us. Chris Carter, Patricia Traynor. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel all year long because they are America's #1 sportsbook. And now here are your numbers on where Steelers Giants is right now heading into Thursday. This week, the Steelers opened as 4.5-point favorites. That number has now grown to 6.5-point favorites, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, in their Monday night matchup at home against the New York Giants. The Steelers are getting minus 295 on the money line. The Giants plus 240. The over-under, though, sitting steadily at 36.5 points. Is that enough with the new offense that the Steelers are running? We'll find out Monday night. Make all your bets. The best place to make all those bets on FanDuel Sportsbook. And today, if you get started, it's your first ever bet on FanDuel Sportsbook, you can get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first bet of $5 or more today. That's $200 in free bets today for new customers when they just bet $5 or more, only on FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get that deal. And when you get there, you can download the app for America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on Crossover Thursday, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Patricia Traynor of Locked On Giants. Patricia, let's talk about these young guns at wide receivers. Now, George Pickens a lot less young as far as how things go out. He's actually 23. He'll be 24 by the end of the regular season here. Malik Nabers just turned 21 not too long ago. But still, these are young guys that have been very impressive. And a lot of people have talked about what Malik Nabers has been able to do with the Giants. He already has, 3 receiving touchdowns on the year. when I look at those 5 deep ball completions that Daniel Jones has, 3 of them are Malik Nabers this season. What has he done that's impressed you the most? And what is the big thing that you think the Steelers need to be aware of when facing off against his big playmaker ability?
Yeah, I think the fact that he has come in as advertised, deep play threat, very mature for a 21-year-old, very competitive, wants every ball. I think sometimes he's a little too competitive for his own good because, he's not afraid to try to outmuscle a defender for the ball. And sometimes, you got to, depending on how the angle is and whatnot, sometimes you just got to say, let it go, live to see another down. But look, this kid has made such a difference because now he's starting to draw the bracket coverage, which should theoretically open things up for the other guys. And, if the quarterback can get the ball to them, then great. Malik Nabers will have done his job without, necessarily doing his job, which is to catch the ball. But he has just been so good for this team. And, they missed him probably more so against the Bengals, which was a loss at home, than they did against Seattle. Seattle, they were able to get by, without him. But he does make a difference in the game. He's become Daniel Jones's favorite target with good reason. And, these other receivers and just, without somebody to draw double coverage, now it's like, okay, they can be neutralized pretty easily. So, if you want to stop Malik Nabers, you've got to get physical with him. No receiver likes to get bumped off the line of scrimmage, within that first few yards where it's allowed. Knock him off his timing, his route. And just, basically put your fastest guy on him because he can run, he can cut, he can just, I call him a cloud of dust. That's not his official nickname, by the way, like the others I gave you, but he's a cloud of dust. He really is. You blink and boom, he's gone. I don't know. I'll have to ask him if he's got a nickname besides Leak. Right now they just call him Leak, whenever he catches a ball at the stadium. But yeah, he has been something else, and I'm glad they got him.
I think he's certainly been an impressive playmaker. I haven't been able to study him in depth, but when I watch the highlights, I'm like, oh man, that guy's popping off the screen like he did in college. When I look at the contested catch numbers, that's something that I always look at for big name receivers. How well do you come down with the ball in traffic? He's caught five contested catches on 13 contested catch targets, according to Pro Football Focus. George Pickens caught 6 of 17 of those balls, so very similar rates there as far as going up and get it. And that's what George Pickens is known for, is being able to go up and get the football in this game. If George Pickens is going up against somebody, Patricia, who is that person? Is it Jason Pinnock? Is it someone else? Who is going to be the person that probably is tasked with taking him out of the game?
So Pickens would be their number one receiver, right?
Absolutely.
Probably Deonte Banks. And Deonte Banks has traveled with the opposing number one receiver, I want to say, in at least 5 out of the last 7 games.
Okay.
So I think it'll probably be Deonte Banks. Now, there's an asterisk to that. That's if Deonte Banks doesn't get benched. And I say that because for Pittsburgh fans who aren't aware, Deonte Banks has been inconsistent, shall we say, with his effort. And it's been blatant to the point where his coaches are starting to get on him. So against the Eagles, there were a couple of plays where he just basically just stood there and he's like, oh, okay, I'm just checking out the view. And the coaches didn't like that. So I wonder if Brian Dable isn't going to sit Deonte Banks, not for the whole game. I don't think he would sit him for the whole game, but will he sit him maybe for a series or a quarter? That remains to be seen, because obviously calling him out in public, as they did a few weeks ago, didn't do anything. The message didn't get across. And I think it's time to take the next step in showing this young man that you got to give maximum effort every single play. So we'll see how that plays out. But to answer your question, Banks would probably be the guy that covers George Pickens.
It's interesting there, because that's something that's come as a criticism for George Pickens. Even recently this year against the Colts and Cowboys, he was questioning his effort on his route running, because it was obvious he wasn't running his hardest routes. Now I think that's changed in the last game or two. But looking at how the Steelers have been playing, I think that they're looking that would be certainly very interesting to see those two match up. On the flip side, Joey Porter Jr. has been the Steelers' top cornerback, and it looks like Dante Jackson is actually going to miss this game with a shoulder injury. So the Steelers are going to might be shorthanded at corner. I fully anticipate if there's one guy the Steelers assigned to, it's Joey Porter Jr., who as I went over in our last show on Wednesday with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic, we both thought Joey Porter Jr. has quietly been a very good cornerback in the NFL this year. He's not given up big plays. He's gotten an interception while covering CeeDee Lamb. He's been able to run with number ones, not exclusively. The Steelers haven't given him that duty yet in this defense, but I think he's very physical. So if you're looking for guys to jam him and get off the line, Malik Nabers, that's the kind of corner that Joey Porter loves to be. How have you seen him deal with that? Like, Malik Nabers obviously getting separation, but how have you seen him deal with the physical corners that don't give him the space to run right away?
Well, he'll fight you. He'll fight you tooth and nail. He's very, very competitive, which is one of the reasons why head coach Brian Dable kind of fell in love with him at the combine. We saw this unravel, by the way, on Hard Knocks. He absolutely fell in love with the guy and just was thrilled with the answers that Malik Nabers gave him. And they weren't just words. He has shown that he's competitive, that he wants to win, that he hates to lose. He wants the ball, so he has come as advertised, as I said. So, but yeah, if you start, infringing on his territory, he will fight you. He doesn't back down to anyone. And it doesn't matter if you're a first-year player or if you're a 10-year veteran. He believes he has a right to that ball. And if you want to try and stop him, good luck.
I hear you there. I like feisty receivers. I like guys that fight like that. I think him and Joey Porter Jr. could be appointment television Monday Night Football, as it should be on Monday Night Football in prime time. We still have a lot more to talk about in this topic in our coming days. Both of us will have Friday and Monday shows previewing this game, looking at other things heading into the weekend. Patricia, thank you so much for joining me here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Patricia_Traina, Traina. You can find my written work at New York Giants on SI, which is part of the Sports Illustrated Network, the Sports Illustrated Media Group. You can also follow me on Instagram at Patty Traina, PATTI_TRAINA. And we also have a Facebook page, which is NY Giants Maven.
Absolutely. She's Patricia Traina. You want anything Giants, she's your go-to person. Get it in all those outlets and on Locked On Giants, just like you can get Locked On Steelers on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Locked On Giants or Locked On Steelers content. I'm your host of Locked On Steelers, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, including my recent film study on what Arthur Smith's run schemes are doing for Najee Harris. We're both back Friday on our shows for Locked On Steelers and Locked On Giants. We hope you have a great week, a great rest of your week. We'll see you Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network.